There are two major institutions involved in ecological preservation: botanical gardens and zoos. When they were first created in Europe, they were places of wealth and leisure. Later, these institutions transformed into educational institutions. Today, they have become a culmination of their past as a place of fun, education, and conservation. Botanical gardens and zoos are crucial in protecting our environment and educating the public. Prior to the Aztecs, many important figures all over the world collected plants for their beauty, medicine, and economic uses. The Aztecs were the first to study plants for medicinal properties, making them most similar to what we currently call botanical gardens. Since botanical gardens are focused on the study of plants, they are often attached to universities and include libraries and more specific plant centers like herbariums and arboretums. Similar to art galleries, many botanical gardens were purchased and collected by the rich and influential during their initial creation. The first European garden was the Pisa Garden, which was first created in Padua and later moved to Pisa. This was the first garden to set a precedent for learning and teaching. During its existence, it created catalogs, gave lectures, and was later attached to the University of Pisa. Botanical gardens are defined as such for their main purpose of studying botany, but there are several ways which they can be more specifically defined. For example, medicinal gardens, colonial gardens, Linnaean gardens, civic gardens, specialist gardens, and the most important today is the sanctuary garden. In the textbook, the authors state that recent research by Jocelyn Dodd and Sari Jones has identified 7 areas where botanic gardens are demonstrating a greater social role, relevance, and responsibility: broadening audiences, conducting research which has socioeconomic impact locally and globally, contributing to public and political debates on the environment, modeling sustainable behavior, and changing attitudes and behaviors. Originally created for the Princess of Wales on the 9 acres of Key House, today the Royal Botanical Gardens is arguably the most influential botanical garden in Europe, if not the world. In 1772, King George III inherited Kew, giving it its royal title, and hired a landscape architect named Lancelot Brown. Recently, 300 years later, Brown was celebrated for his incredible designs, which can be seen in over 250 locations. It was the king and his botanical advisor, Joseph Banks, dream to make the Botanical Garden a place where plants from every country could be seen. Unfortunately, the king and Banks died in 1820, shortly before the invention of the Wardian case, which would have made the transportation of plants much more successful. Nathaniel Ward invented the Wardian case, a small portable greenhouse, in 1833. As early as the 1860s, Kew has been teaching the next generation of botanists today. Today, they still accept 14 students into their program each year. The colonial period saw botanical gardens coming to the Americas. The first was the United States Botanical Garden, which still exists today, alongside over 500 other botanical gardens. A few other noteworthy institutions are the Missouri Botanical Garden, Huntington Botanical Gardens, and the Longwood Botanical Gardens. The Chicago Botanical Gardens is one of the most influential sites today. They are focusing on social issues that plant life faces and educating the public of all ages. In a city where people rarely see trees, there is an oasis that allows them to dip their toes in the water, dig in the dirt, and spend quality time with nature. During their inception, zoos, like gardens, were created in Europe for the rich to enjoy in the private of their backyards. Harry Gersh states that zoos require 2 basic elements: wealth and leisure. There had to be enough money to pay for food and housing and keepers, so that keeping the animals in parks and cages did not interfere with the other luxuries of the owners of the zoos and parks. There also had to be sufficient leisure for enjoying exhibits. When zoos found the right over to the Americas in 1854 in Philadelphia and New York, they quickly became popular across the country. The first children's zoo was opened in 1874 at the Philadelphia Zoo, and still to this day has over 1 million family visitors each year. Over time, there have been only a few ways to display animals. The first, often seen as cruel, was to display them in cages. But in 1902, Carl Hagenbeck introduced a new method, using realistic settings and moats to contain the animals. The third and most radical of the approaches was introduced by Temple Hornaday, director of the New York Zoological Society, in 1899. By purchasing 250 acres, he was able to allow animals to roam free while visitors could see them up close. Due to admittance fees, zoos and botanical gardens don't have as many issues as other public teaching institutions to keep their doors open, but their history is still littered with abandoned facilities. The Safari Zoo, for example, is certainly becoming less and less popular, not only due to funding issues, but the exhaust from vehicles make the animals sick and they have a higher tendency to escape their enclosures. Many zoos today also have issues with the general public seeing the entrapment of animals as cruel. However, zoos have been able to raise greater awareness of the preservation of animals because of trophy hunting media coverage. One of the biggest issues botanical gardens are facing is the ability to be accessible to handicapped individuals who can't go over rough terrain or fit in small spaces. Currently, botanical gardens are uploading their collections online and creating virtual tours to allow these visitors access. The purpose of gardens and zoos is to protect the flora and animals we still have while raising awareness for how individuals can assist in their efforts. Thanks to botanical gardens and zoos, we have successfully saved an incredible amount of plants and animals. It is also due to the efforts of several explorers and botanists that the world has forever been changed. They were the ones who first introduced potatoes to Ireland and defined cinchona plant, which helps cure malaria. Not only are they fun places to take the family, but today botanical gardens and zoos are still having a positive and forever changing effect on our social views and actions. The vision of the zoo, as outlined in its 2020 strategy, speaks to the broader aims of zoos, botanical gardens, and museums that see part of their mission as social responsibility and having a foot in the past as well as the present and future. All botanical gardens and zoos came into creation in Europe with the main purpose of being a form of entertainment for the wealthy and their friends. Like today, many people of the time were concerned with the study of plants and animals just as much as they were the collection of them. Today, we are still caring for plants and animals in the hope of continuing education, not only for professionals but the general public as well, while at the same time protecting them for future generations.